Andrew Snowden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Every week the Prime Minister comes here and reads out this pre-scripted nonsense that bears no resemblance to the questions he's actually asked. The Leader of the Opposition asked him about Peter Mandelson and he answered about the war in Iran. The Leader of the Opposition asked him about Mandelson again and he answered with an attack on the Shadow Justice Secretary. He was asked about Mandelson again and talked about protests in London. What is he scared of? What is he hiding? For a man who has spent years presenting himself as a forensic investigator.
PMQ's meltdown. Starmer refuses to answer the same question 4 times, and Britain is watching. Welcome back to British Energy, the channel that cuts through the noise and gives you British politics straight, no chaser. If you are new here, do yourself a favor and subscribe right now. Hit that bell. This channel exists because someone has to hold the mirror up to Westminster, and we are not afraid of the reflection. Stay with us till the end of this one, because it only gets more extraordinary as it goes. Right. Let us talk about what happened in the House of Commons this week. Because if you watched Prime Minister's questions live, you either laughed, cringed, or sat in stunned silence, wondering whether the man at the dispatch box actually thought the British public would not notice. Spoiler, we noticed. Kemi Badenoch walked into that chamber on Wednesday with one question, just one, clear, direct, pointed. Did the Prime Minister personally speak to Peter Mandelson about his relationship with the convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein before appointing him as our ambassador to Washington? That was it. That was the question. 4 times she asked it. 4 times. And 4 times Sir Keir Starmer stood up, adjusted his tie, and answered an entirely different question that nobody had asked him. Now, in any functioning democracy, this would be a scandal. In Britain, it is a Wednesday. But let us not allow familiarity to breed indifference, because what happened at the dispatch box this week was not just political theater. It was a Prime Minister in full view of the nation, refusing to be accountable, and that matters enormously. Let us go back to the beginning, the Mandelson files. For those just tuning in, Lord Peter Mandelson, one of the most powerful figures in British Labour politics for the past 3 decades, was appointed by Sir Keir Starmer as the UK's ambassador to the United States, a significant appointment, a prestigious posting, a role that puts a man at the very heart of Britain's most important diplomatic relationship. Now, documents have emerged, what the press are calling the Mandelson files, which raise serious questions about Lord Mandelson's association with Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex offender whose contact network has become one of the most politically radioactive topics in the Western world. The question is not complicated. Before you handed your old friend one of the most senior diplomatic roles available, did you ask him about this? Did you have that conversation? Starmer's response to Kemi's opening question was to tell the Commons that the government was complying with requests to release the files. Complying, not answering, complying. As if the act of releasing documents, which were released immediately after PMQs the previous week, timed precisely to avoid scrutiny, was the same as actually being transparent. It is not. Transparency is not strategy. Transparency is honesty. And what we witnessed this week was strategy, dressed up as transparency, which is rather a different thing entirely. Badenoch pressed again, asked again. The Prime Minister this time offered that Lord Mandelson lied in response to questions, but could not bring himself to clarify whether those questions came from him personally or from advisors who, and this is rather important, were themselves close personal friends of Mandelson. Think about that for a moment. The man being investigated, essentially having his account verified by his own friends. It would be farcical if the stakes were not so serious. Now, if you are finding this as extraordinary as we are here at British Energy, do subscribe. This kind of analysis, week in, week out, holding power to account without fear or favor, that is what this channel is built for. The subscribe button costs you nothing. The information it gives you is priceless. 3rd attempt by Badenoch. 3rd non-answer from Starmer. This time the Prime Minister pivoted, and you really could not make this up, to religious events in Trafalgar Square. He brought up an iftar. He criticized the Shadow Justice Secretary. He talked about anything at all, except whether he personally interrogated his old friend about Epstein connections before handing him an ambassadorship. Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, had to rebuke the Prime Minister for failing to answer questions. The Speaker rebuking the Prime Minister in Parliament. Let that sit with you. Badenoch, to her credit, did not fluster. She is becoming rather good at this, and her supporters would say she was made for precisely this kind of forensic confrontation. She told the chamber that she would take the Prime Minister's continued evasion to mean that he did not personally speak to Mandelson and that he left the vetting to advisors who were themselves friends of the very man being vetted. Starmer did not correct her. He moved on, which is, in the language of Westminster, as close to a concession as you are going to get without an actual admission. And then came the line of the week, of possibly the month. Kemi Badenoch looked across the dispatch box and said, drawing on a comment made by Angela Rayner the previous evening, "She and I both agree that this weak man needs to be replaced by a strong woman." Now, whatever your politics, whatever your view of Mrs. Badenoch, you cannot deny that line landed. The chamber erupted. And the extraordinary thing is that the first part of that sentence referenced not a conservative, but Starmer's own former deputy prime minister. Angela Rayner. She is the story running just beneath the surface of all of this. The night before PMQs, she stood up at an event by the campaign group Mainstream and delivered what can only be described as a warning shot. She said Labour is running out of time to deliver change. She said the party has come to represent the establishment, not working people. She called for a change of course. This is the former deputy prime minister speaking publicly about the sitting prime minister's failures within his own party. This is not background noise. This is the beginning of something. Andy Burnham, the mayor of Manchester, was asked about Rayner's comments on BBC Radio 4 the following morning. He said he understood where she's coming from. He talked about frustration. He talked about needing a plan to turn the country around. He did not defend Starmer. He did not dismiss Rayner. He did what careful politicians do when they sense the wind changing direction. He kept his options open. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats have tabled a motion calling on the king to cancel his upcoming state visit to the United States. The reasoning, as stated in the motion, is to ensure His Majesty is not placed in an embarrassing situation, given what they describe as President Trump's ongoing conduct and remarks about the United Kingdom. Now that is a remarkable thing, a British political party formally advising the monarch to snub the American president. Whatever you think of the merits, the Lib Dems are reading the room. The war in Iran, the transatlantic relationship, the sense that Britain is being pulled along by events it cannot control, these are the anxieties simmering beneath every PMQs, every speech, every political calculation being made in Westminster right now. And here is the thread that ties all of it together. Leadership, or rather, the question of it. Starmer cannot answer a direct question about Mandelson. Rayner says the clock is ticking. Burnham nods along. The Lib Dems are making moves. Badenoch is sharpening her lines. And somewhere in the corridors of power, people are doing what they always do when a government starts to wobble. They are counting. This is what British politics looks like in 2025. It is not the slow, stately drama of a Westminster confident in its institutions. It is fractious, uncertain, and in some quarters, genuinely anxious. The government has a majority that most prime ministers would dream of, and yet it cannot seem to translate that majority into authority. Authority requires accountability. Accountability requires honesty. And honesty, as we saw 4 times at PMQs this week, is not always forthcoming. We say this at British Energy with no particular pleasure. A government in crisis is not good for the country, but a government that believes evasion is the same as governance is worse. The British public deserves better than a prime minister who talks about Trafalgar Square when asked about Epstein. They deserve better than vetting processes run by friends of the man being vetted. They deserve clarity, they deserve accountability, and they deserve a political press and commentary class willing to say so, loudly and without apology. Which is exactly why this channel exists. British Energy is not here to take sides. It is here to take notice, to watch what happens, say what it means, and trust you to make up your own mind. That is the deal, and it is a good one. If you have made it this far, thank you. Genuinely. It means you care about this country and its politics, and that matters more than you know. Please do subscribe to British Energy if you have not already. Every subscriber tells the algorithm that this kind of serious, honest, unapologetic political commentary deserves to be seen, and it does. Share this with someone who should be paying attention but is not yet. They will thank you for it. We will be back very soon with more from Westminster, because one thing is certain, they will give us plenty to talk about. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we will see you next time.